we're going to, instead of focusing on one specific section, we're going to take a look at a series of sections, because what's happening now is we're reaching the climactic moments of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And as we reach the climactic moments, the Torah speaks in staccato fashion. Really, a lot of things happen at once. So we're going to look at some of those issues, some of those texts, and understand what exactly we're being told. We'll start, however, with a point that a lot of people don't recognize, and that is, we're setting the stage here. Paro offers a series of potential compromises as the plagues continue. Moshe refuses them all, but each one of them has something to teach us. So let's take a look at the first. The first on your page is A, worship in place. By the way, I have different page numbers than you do because this is the teacher's guide. So therefore, I'll have to tell you where we are based on the text itself. All right. So we're starting with worship in place. Vayikra Paro el Moshe el Aaron vayomer lichu zivchu lelokechem ba'aretz. What you're asking for is an opportunity to go 3 days away to worship God. Why do you have to go away? Worship right here, right here. I'll give you an opportunity. You can go worship. Moshe says, "Lo nachon lasos kein." It is not appropriate for us to do this. Ki toavas Mitzrayim nizbach lashem, because we are going. I'll use the English here. We'll fine tune it in a moment. We are going to sacrifice that which is untouchable or an abomination to the Egyptians before their very eyes. Will they not stone us? It's dangerous. We can't do it here. So Paro turns and says, absolutely not, and I'm going to not let you out. Now, why does Moshe couch the refusal in those terms? Why doesn't Moshe simply say, no, we won't do it here. We're asking for a 3-day journey. Let us go. Why does he couch it in terms of potential danger for the Jews? Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch turns to the phrase, Ki toavat Mitzrayim nizbach lashem, and he says you can understand that phrase in 2 ways. Either you can understand it that what is discussed, it is discussing to the Egyptians that we should sacrifice their gods, which is the animals that we're sacrificing, or it is disgusting to us that they do those sacrifices, that they actually use those animals as gods. Whether or not, in any case, whether or not we express it, he goes on to say that what we're doing is we're turning to Paro and we're saying what you consider holy, we don't. And the lesson, if I could take Rav Shimshon Rav Hirsch's lesson a bit further, perhaps what Moshe is saying is not only that what you sacrifice is an abomination, Egypt is antithetical to our worship. We can't, for example, some of you may remember we learned about Lot and Sodom and how Lot was pulled into Sodom. Basically, Sodom is not a place where you can be Jewish. Egypt is not a place for the birth of our nation. And in a sense, that's what he's saying. He's saying, we can't do it here. Now, he goes on to say it's dangerous as well. But I believe that the eternal message of that is we can't start here. We have to be out of here. We're rejecting all the things that you've tried to teach us, all the things that you've foisted on us. We're rejecting all of Egypt. We have to go out. Next. The next one is even more dramatic. And question that it raises immediately is obvious. I'm taking a look at B. Whom are we talking about? So what happens at this point is Avdei Paro, the servants of Paro, turn to Paro and say, what are you doing to us? Lahavdil, like the Gazans might be turning to Hamas, if they were smart, and say, what are you doing to us, right? In other words, we're dying here. Please do what they want. So Moshe is called back in. And Paro turns to Moshe and says, L'chu ivdu es Hashem Elokechem, mi v'mi ha'holchim. Go worship your God. Who's going to go? Tell me who you're taking with you. To which Moshe responds with a very famous response. Vayomer Moshe, bin orenu v'zkenenu nelech, bivonenu uvivnosenu. We're going to go with our old and our young and our sons and our daughters. Bitzonenu, with our sheep and with our cattle, nelech, kikad lashem lanu. Now, because it's a holiday for God, for us. Let's deal with both question and answer. Why? How can Paro turn to Moshe at this point and say, Miva mi ha'holchim? Who's going to go? Isn't Paro aware by now that what Moshe is asking for is the total exodus of his nation for 3 days at least, right? We'll talk about that later. So why is he asking, Miva mi ha'holchim? Secondly, Moshe, and we've noted before that one of Moshe's traits was that he was not very diplomatic, unlike his brother Aaron, right? Unlike Aaron. But the lack of diplomacy here is startling. Why doesn't he just say we're all going to go? Right, Paro, we're all going to go. That's the answer. What has been on Renu Vizkanenu? He's like throwing it in the face of Paro. Why is he doing that? So you have to understand that much more is happening here than that simple dialogue between the king and Moshe. This is, in a nutshell, a conflict between two very powerful ideas. One idea is the idea of Egypt, which is religion is relegated to a select few. Right? We have our priests; they're dealing with religion; they'll take care of it, and all sorts of superstitions, etc., etc. But real religious worship is taken care of by a few. And therefore, Paro is saying to Moshe, if you're really telling the truth, Miva mi'alchim, who's going to go? Are your Kohanim going to go? Who's going to go? Tell me, but I'll let that handful of people go out. To which Moshe responds, you don't understand, Paro. A new world is aborning. A new vista. What's happening here is a religion is being born that will require its young and its old, its men and its women, everybody. Everyone is involved. Kichag Lashem Lanu. Because this is what we're talking about is a celebration to God for us. That means everybody. And basically he's saying the new way, our new way, is distinct from yours. You will relegate religion to a select few, and we will say it's totally open to all. And not only totally open to all, if one is missing, then we're that's a demerit for us. That's a loss for us. Everyone has to be there. Anyone that's not there, it's a loss not just for that person, it's a loss for the community. Okay, so that's the second compromise. Paro says go, but he says who's going to go? The third compromise, yes, please.
Does Paro understand that this is a one-off? That it's going to go? He says don't go far. But
okay, there is a debate. There is a debate between those who say that Paro continues to feel that it's a 3-day journey, and those who say that by this time, or at least by the Exodus, Paro has come to the conclusion that they're going for good. And we don't know that. We'll take a look at that debate and where it leads us in a little while.
Wasn't Paro threatened by the fact that Moshe said, new vista, new religion?
You're assuming Paro got it. All right, you're asking, wasn't Paro affected by Moshe's answer?
No, I'm saying
threatened.
That's
Yeah, and
more reason he wouldn't let them go.
The answer to your question, I believe, is he's not going to let them go even for 3 days. Why? Because forget about this statement. If you allow your slaves a glimmer of freedom, they're going to change completely. All right. And that's why tyrants throughout the world, and remember, it took a lot of things to subjugate the Jews. We said it didn't happen all at once, step by step. Give them a ray of hope. They either they won't come back or they'll come back a different people, but they won't stand for it anymore. So that's why, as I said, tyrants throughout the ages have subjugated people to the point where they won't even allow a glimmer to come out because they're afraid of it. They're afraid that it will blossom into much more. I don't know whether Paro got it, but we have to get it. The message that Moshe was giving here. Right. In other words, what we learn from this section is exactly what we need to know, which is that our religion is different from ancient religions because we believe that everyone is involved. Yes.
I was just wondering about the Lo Ein L'chuna Hakvarim. Paro says just the guys can go.
Right.
And Moshe obviously uses that. So is this the first statement of the Torah that women have to be included in?
That's a very interesting point. Is this the first place? Paro says, okay, I hear your argument, just take the men. And is this the first place in the Torah where it's indicated that the women have a role to play in the nation? The answer probably is yes. What do I mean by that? Everything before this, in terms of our history, was prehistory. It was the patriarchal era. But it was the patriarchal and matriarchal era. Let's remember that. In fact, at least in two occasions, it's because of the women that the process continued, right? In other words, with Abraham, when he was told by Sarah to kick out Shmuel, and by Yaakov, when he was told to deceive his father, without going into all the details there. So that clearly the model from the patriarchal era is that the women are not only involved, but they're essential. Now that the nation is being born, this may be the first place that it's spelled out as part of the nationhood, right? In other words, now that the nation is being born, then Moshe is saying, we are a different nation. We're different and we involve everybody. Yes, one last comment. Yes.
How many Jews were there at that time?
Okay. All right. Yes. They say the Torah talks about 600,000 men, but there weren't millions.
So he was saying to Pharaoh, we're going to move a couple million people out for 3 days and bring them back.
First of all, he never says he'll bring him back. All right, that's why some people say there's no outright lie there. He says we'll go for 3 days. What?
How could Pharaoh even think to it?
Well, the answer is the plagues. Look what's happening. I mean, he comes to a point where he has to agree, right? He has no choice. Lahavdil Elef Havdalos, the debate that's taking place now, is it the right deal? Is it the wrong deal? Many feel that Netanyahu had no choice by the time that deal came on the table. That Trump was forcing him, others were I don't know the truth. And I also am torn about the deal because I celebrate the reunion of those families and I mourn the release of the terrorists. So I don't know what the answer is. But the point that I'm saying, I don't want to get political at all. What I'm saying is that Paro is, by the time you get to Makas Bechoros, by the time you get to that last plague, Paro has no choice. That's it. He's moved to the point where he's got to let them go. All right. One final potential compromise, and this one's a little rough. Paro turns to Moshe and he says, "Live l'chu ivdu as Hashem. Go, all of you can go. Rak tzonchem ubekarchem, only your sheep and your cattle leave behind." Wow, that sounds like a good deal, right? Doesn't it? It sounds like a reasonable deal. We're going for 3 days. We'll come back, right? That's the truth. Huh? However, what does Moshe say? And Moshe's answer is very strange. He says, "Gam atoti tein biyodenu zvachim va'olos v'asinu l'Hashem Elokeinu." you are going to give us animals to use in our service for God. And also our cattle will go with us. Now, it seems to me that that's backwards, right? Shouldn't he say, our cattle will go with us, and not only that, but you're going to give us animals too, right? Doesn't that sound right? In other words, not only this, but this. It's backwards. Not only will we use our own, we'll use yours. So what he's saying clearly is, we are making up the decisions. We are independent. You don't want us to take our cattle, not only because you want to hold that over us for us to come back, but because you want to control the unveiling Chag. You want to have you don't want us to have independence and use our own things to worship God. You want us to use yours. And therefore, I'm telling you, yes, we'll use yours. You're going to give us wealth. But at the same time, we are an independent people. And we will not rely on your benevolence to give us things to use for our worship. Again, not to get political, but one of the things that we're learning in Israel now, apparently, is that we can't depend in the long run on anybody else. That we have to create our own, and without that, then we're always a bit in danger. All right. So those are the three potential compromises. The next thing I want to look at is a very interesting mystery, and that is, there are particular points in the plagues when the Torah says Goshen and the Hebrews, the Israelites, were spared. But it only says it at certain times. There is no mention of separation by dam, by the blood, by tzfardea, by the frogs, and by the kinim, by the lice. So what does that mean? In other words, if the Torah is telling me that the other plagues spared the Jews, that the other plagues spared the Jews, then, I mean, that these plagues, where it says specifically the Jews were spared, right? Why doesn't it say it here? What does it mean? If you're specifying that it didn't happen by those other plagues, then by deduction, I would say that the Jews were not spared. So there is a very fascinating debate between the Ramban and the Even Ezra. All right, I'm in section Roman numeral 2, plagued by a mystery. The Even Ezra comes along and says, listen. There are those who say that the first Makkah, spared, that the Israelites didn't have dam, that they couldn't have water. No one else did, but they did. No, says the Even Ezra. When the Torah does not say distinctly that the Israelites were spared, they were afflicted by the plague as well. Wow, right? Along comes the Ramban, and the Ramban says, wait 1 second. No, I'm wrong. That's right. No, that what I just told you was the what I just told you was the Even Ezra, but the Even Ezra is the second one rather than the first on your sheet, right? The Ramban says no. The Ramban says all the plagues did not touch one Israelite. Why does it say it by specific plagues? Because those are plagues that are spreading naturally. And I would have thought that they would affect the Israelites. So the Torah has to tell me that they won't. But I want to look at the Even Ezra for just a moment. I'm not rejecting the Ramban. Perhaps he's right. It may be that Israel was spared all of the plagues. Why would, according to the Even Ezra, why would God afflict the Israelites as well? And I'm going to offer two possible answers. I don't know if they're right, but two potentials. And both of them are important. The first one is, we've learned, and this is a hard thing to say, and I'm not blaming the victim, but that we've learned that the Israelites were somewhat culpable. Please. Use the seat. Use the seat. Okay. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. That's fine. No problem at all. No problem at all. Okay. So we've learned that the Israelites had a hand in their own enslavement, didn't we? We learned that they broke out of Goshen and they went and they began to assimilate into Egyptian culture. So perhaps HaKadosh Baruch Hu is reminding them, you have to have some pain here too, because you played a role in your own enslavement. That's one possibility. The second possibility, which I think is equally powerful, is Hashem says the following by afflicting the Israelites: you cannot be surrounded by pain and remain unaffected. You have to be a nation that if those around you are in pain, even if they're not Jewish, you feel their pain. And therefore, to spare you from all of the plagues would be giving you the wrong message. It would allow you to see that pain and remain unafflicted. Yes?
This line of thinking weakened the effect of the plagues. Because the Egyptians will see that there are some plagues that do affect them. And therefore, maybe it's not God, it's net nature.
So the answer to that is that it does. This Evan Ezra's saying that those plagues, the Egyptians could have said, look, it's affecting them as well. But all the others didn't. All the others didn't touch the Jews. So yes, it's creating some of a buffer, right? And potential misunderstanding. But when you take them all in total, clearly the Jews, the plagues were miracles. Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. One last comment. Yeah.
How do you, in the light of your explanation, how do you relate to the Makata Choshech, the darkness, where there's, the Midrash?
Right. That's one of the places. I didn't say it, did I? That's one of the places where the darkness. It says, so the Jews were not affected by darkness.
What about that Midrash that, Kamushim Anu B'nai Yisrael, that 4/5 of them died?
So there's an interesting medrash. It's not Pashut Pshat, clearly. He's asking about, just for the audience outside, he's asking, what about the medrash? It said that the Israelites died during Choshech. And the answer is, it would seem, that for those, according to the medrash, who deserved to have Choshech were affected.
Well, there was no Choshech for them. They died, but it was not in Choshech.
Yeah, but the whole idea of them.
No, the Mitzvah weren't supposed to.
That's a good point. Excellent. Maybe she's saying the Egyptians didn't see them die because they were in Koshech, and that was the point. So that's a good answer too. All right, excellent. That's a better answer, actually. All right. So now let's go to the real climactic moments before us, and this is appropriate for us also because it's Parshas HaShavua. We're talking now about Vayihi B'Shalach. So Paro lets the Jews out. The Israelites, they're not Jews, lets the Israelites out, right? And then God does something strange. Daber, no, I'm looking, it said all roads lead to the sea, setting the stage. Daber el b'nei Israel, v'yashuvu, v'yachanu lifnei pi hachiros, bein migdal ubein hayam. Tell the Jews, the Israelites, to go back, not to keep going forward, to stop and to take some steps back. Why? Why is he telling them to do that? And then Paro said, Omar Paro livnei Yisrael, and he tells you the reason. Nevuchim heim ba'aretz sogar aleihem hamidor. And Paro will come to the conclusion that you don't know where you're going. And we'll come back to that. Then the Torah says the following. After V'chizakti al harden its heart, he's going to come after you. The last underlined section, Vayugad lemelech Mitzrayim ki vorach ha'am. Literally, and it was told to Paro that the nation fled. Hold on. Wait a minute. He was told to Paro that the nation fled? Paro was the one who in the middle of the night said, get out of here. Go. So what is Vayugad leParo? That the nation fled. So one answer is that because of turning back somewhat, Paro comes to the conclusion that the God of Israel is not leading them anymore. That somehow they're now vulnerable. Because if the God was leading them, they wouldn't turn around and come back. They're obviously lost in the desert. They're confused. So therefore, now is a good time for me to go. The other possibility is brought by the Medrash, brought by Rashi. Turn to the next page. Well, my next page. I think it may be on your same page. Rashi Shmot Yudalet Hey. Okay. What page is that? 4. Okay, good. Thank you. Aktoron shalach imohem, v'keven shehigia l'shloshet yomim shekavu leilech v'lashuv, v'ra'u she'eno chozrin, ba'u v'gidu leparo bayom harvi. On the 4th day and the 5th day he starts going. What's this Medrash saying? This Medrash says that Paro put spies in with the Israelites. And they came back to report at the end of 3 days, hey, Paro, they're not coming back. You thought they were coming back, right? They're not coming back. And therefore, Paro says, if they're not coming back, I'm going to go. And I'm going to absolutely go after them. Now, both of these approaches, the second one in a very powerful way, indicate that the scene at the sea, the parting of Yam Suf, was inevitable, and God orchestrates the pursuit of the Egyptians towards the Israelites. Right? In other words, the first one says he has them go back now. Paro comes to the conclusion they're confused, and he's chasing them. The second one, though, goes even further. The second one says that the concept of 3 days, which was given to Moshe at the Sneh, already before the Exodus story begins, and those 3 days are carried through the Exodus story, was all a setup. Was all a setup. God is setting up circumstances where you tell him 3 days, just keep going, and he'll chase you, and he has to chase you. And what has to happen is the Egyptian army has to be decimated and destroyed, and you have to see that destruction because it will never be free unless you witness that. So, but it creates, the Medrash creates a little discomfort, doesn't it? That we would be setting up the pursuit only to destroy them, where God would set up the pursuit only to destroy them. So there are a lot of potential answers. And by the way, Rav Shimshon Ufal Hirsch says, after the 10 plagues, Paro sent the people away with full idea of their not returning. So that's the debate. Does Paro still think, even at the end of the 10 plagues, that the Israelites are coming back? Or does Paro come to the conclusion that no, they ain't coming back? And then he hears they are confused, and then he pursues them in spite of the fact that they were continuing to go. So there are a couple of answers as to why we would be more comfortable with this possibility of God setting up this deceit. One is, especially if Paro continues to believe it, right? One is all's fair in love and war, right? When you're fighting an enemy, we deceive enemies when we fight them? Sure we do. We send spies. We do all sorts of things. We play tricks. We try to do this. We try to do that. What beepers? Very good, very good. Right. So this is all in line with that concept that you can do it if you're fighting a difficult enemy and you're fighting those who enslaved you. It's fair to deceive them and set this up. And by the way, there is an interesting illustration in the Talmud. And Talmud does not illustrate, right? But there's a drawing which shows that what, based on the text in terms of where they stopped after Yam Suf, that the Israelites went into Yam Suf, see, but didn't get to the other side. They turned in a semicircle and came back to the same side, which means that the chicken crossed the road to get to the other side, right? No, we did not cross the road to get to the other side. We crossed the road only to destroy the Egyptians. And that's, again, the idea being that, and I believe that Hashem knows that it really is essential for them to see the total decimation of Egyptian power if they have any chance of being free. And we know, as I said before, that this generation doesn't make it, in spite of all the things that God gives them. Yes?
I learned that this was the ultimate punishment for having thrown the Jewish boys into the...
Okay, right. There are...
That's why Hashem
insisted. All right, I'll say that so everyone can hear. It's very good. There are those who take all of the 10 plagues, actually, and divide them and show that they are measure for measure, but this one's really clear. You threw our kids into the Nile, Egyptian army will drown in Yam Suf. So therefore, yes.
Did the Egyptians see Bnei Israel come out of some sort of horseshoe?
And
Why would they go in?
no, I don't think so. In other words,
they were
in. According to that interpretation, that they came back to the same side. Obviously, you can't have the Egyptians standing at the same side. They would then just turn around and not go into the sea. So the answer seems to be, according to that position, that the Israelites went in. They were still in when the disaster hit the Egyptians. And that's what it seems. All right. But according to that position. All right. Yes.
If I'm remembering correctly, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said that the splitting of the sea, scientifically they found out that it can happen every once in a while because of the winds, and the changing of the winds was so strong that it actually can split. So he says what the miracle was not the splitting, it was the timing.
Right. Okay. So the answer for those that are watching on the tape, perhaps so nobody heard you. You're suggesting, or you said that Rabbi Sachs suggests, that naturally the Reed Sea potentially splits or retreats, and the miracle wasn't that it happened, the miracle was that it happened now. And the answer to that, I think, is God works within the world sometimes. It could be, it doesn't have to be, right? I don't know, I wasn't there. But if it happens naturally, it certainly is not something that would shake my belief. We're going to come to, in the Torah text, after this, we come to a place called Marah. And in Marah, the bitter waters, what does God tell Moshe to do? Take a tree, a wood, and throw it into the water. Say some of the commentaries, that was a natural miracle. It so happens that that particular tree sweetens water. So what God told him to do was well within the bounds of, so it's possible. I don't know. It's possible. It doesn't have to be, though. That's the key. Does not have to be that it could happen naturally, because we believe that it would have happened supernaturally if it needed to. Okay, so yeah. Right. Okay, They answer. Okay, still, she's suggesting that we need to recognize that everything is from Hashem. I happen to think that that's the message of Morah. In other words, I happen to think that after the splitting of the sea, which may or may not have been miraculous in terms of the actual split, this was definitely not, according to some. This was natural, and Hashem is saying, look at the world around you. I created everything, and look at the wonders within that world. Here's a tree that sweetens water, etc.
Tsunami is an example. Like if there was a tsunami, Hashem could have held the waters back longer than they were held back.
All right, correct. We don't know why things happen. Right. Okay. Good. Good. All right. Let me go on. I'll take questions at the end. Okay. The next, fear and response, section B. Vayirdefu Mitzrayim acharehem. Mitzrayim is chasing them. Vayasiwo sam chonim al hayam. They come to them. They catch up to them. Six at the top. Okay, they come and they catch up to Israel by the sea, etc. And then it says the following: Ufaro hikriv, Paro grew near, vayisu b'nei Yisrael eseinehem. Israelites lifted their eyes, and they saw Mitzrayim noseim achareim. They saw Egypt traveling behind them, vayiru ma'od, and they had great fear. Now, the pashut shot of that pasuk is Paro drew near with everybody, and they saw everybody. But the Malbim does not accept the pashut shot here, and it's very interesting because I think that it speaks to our own experience in a very real way, and that is what happened. Paro hikriv. Paro drew near with his chariots and his people, his army. And according to Malbim, they weren't that afraid, the Israelites, because it was a small number of people. They could perhaps fight, etc. But then behind Paro and the army was a horde of regular Egyptians, a crowd following Paro and the army, and that he says, read the text. Paro hikriv, Paro drew near. Vayisu b'nei Yisrael sanem v'hinei Mitzrayim noseach. Look, Egypt is pursuing, and noseach achareim may be not only following us but following Paro. It's a fascinating thought. It's a fascinating thought, and I know I do this interpretation many years, but I don't think it really hit home until I saw those horrific scenes of some of the earlier hostage releases, when you saw what it means for a mob, right? And the comments that have come back from the hostages, which have said, everyone hates us, everyone there, they're all terrorists. The kids are growing up terrorists. They're all this is what we were afraid of. What they were afraid of was that mob, that hate, that we can't live with, that we can't defeat, that we're struck. We're going to have to. We don't know what we're going to do. That's right. Well said. Well said. Correct. All right. That's pointed out that unfortunately, that's what happened on October 7th as well. That initially the ones who were trained or whatever came, and then the population followed and did horrible things. Horrible things. Okay. All right. So therefore now we're standing at Yam Suf. We're seeing, if the Malbim is correct, not only Paro and his army, but we're seeing Egypt following us. And the Torah tells us what happens. And I'm looking now at Shmot Yudalad Tesvav. It's on mine is 7, but I think it's probably 6 on yours. 7? Okay. Paro hikriv, vayisu b'nei Yisrael einam, etc. Vayomeru el Moshe, hamibli ein kvarim b'Mitzrayim l'kachtanu l'mus b'midbar. So what happens? The Israelites turn on Moshe, And they say, what the heck did you do to us? Weren't there enough graves in Egypt? Right? We could have stayed there and died. We had to come here to die. To which Moshe responds, Vayomer Moshe Elohim, Al tir'u, hisyatzvu u'ru'u es Yeshuas Hashem. Don't be frightened. Stand strong and see the salvation, redemption of God. Asher la'aseh lochem hayom, that God will do for you today. Next pasuk, and he ends, Hashem yilochem lochem, God will fight for you. Vatem techarishu, and you just be quiet. All right, now let's stop there for a minute. The rabbis say that based on Moshe's response, and this is a medrash, it's not in the text, that the Israelites divided themselves into 4 groups, kitot, not consciously, but they were divided by what they wanted to do. One said, let's go forward into the sea. And God will say, maybe God will save us. We don't know. One said, let's go back to Egypt. One said, let's fight them. And one said, we'll just scream it. We'll just talk to God and God will help us. Now, Moshe responds, say the rabbis, to each of these groups when he responds. To those he said, let us fall in the sea. Moshe said, stay firm and witness what's about to happen. To those who said, let us return to Egypt, he says, as you are seeing Egypt today, he says, as you're seeing this country and these people today, never see them again. Then those who said, well, let's fight, Moshe says, Hashem v'yilachem lachem, God is going to fight for you. And for those who said, let's scream and yell and cry, all right, Moshe says, Atem tacharishun, you be quiet. So what the rabbis do is they divide up Moshe's response. Now, why are they saying this? Why? So what? One answer, again, what do we learn from a medrash? The medrash, again, doesn't have to be historically accurate, but it teaches us a powerful thing. And that is that we tend to argue with each other, right? And from the rabbis, from the rabbi's position, what they're saying is, at this critical moment, we acted in kind. This is what we do, unfortunately, and we weren't one people. Now, it's understandable then because they weren't even a nation. What's not understandable is that it continues in our own day about things that are not important. And one of my first, I don't know if I told you this, one of my first experiences in the rabbinate was I was a Rav in Potomac, Maryland, before I became the Rav in Englewood. And I went to what was called a steering committee meeting because the shul didn't have a board because it was a branch of another shul. And the steering committee was having a meeting. I'm a witness to that event. The shul had enough money to buy chairs or tables. It did not have enough money to buy chairs and tables. There were 2 factions. There was the chair faction and the table, I kid you not, and the table faction. And they were going at each other as if, everything depends. No, you're crazy. You don't know. We need the chairs. No, we need the tables. Wonder tables will have chairs. Back and forth. And then one person who was in one of the factions, I don't remember which one, let's say the chair, went to the table, decided to, and he was a traitor. He was a traitor. All right. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, my God, what have I stepped into here? Right? This is my career. People like this. And rabbis will tell you, but what? What do I think was better? Irrelevant to our, right, correct. All right, so therefore, All right. So what's happening? What we're saying is that we tend to argue too much, and it's a problem. It's a problem, and that's why the rabbis say that what happened at Yam Suf was that we argued because they knew that's what we do. They argue in the Gemara. Yes, they do. That's correct. Sometimes the argument can be good. You can walk into a base medrash, by the way, and witness the learning there. And sometimes in certain kavrutot, they are screaming at each other, right? But it's okay. That's an argument l'shem shamayim, right? That's for the sake of heaven. All right, I'll take it after. Okay, go ahead. That's correct. The first thing they did was attack Moshe. Correct. And that's telling as well. Correct. All right. Which is why I was afraid when I saw the chairs and the tables. What's going to happen if they turn on me? Right? Yes. That's correct. He's answering. He's patient with. According to the Medrash, it's okay that they have the four groups. Maybe because he realizes that they're just beginning. Hopefully, they won't be this way all the time. All right. Hope he wasn't right. Okay. And I mean, I could tell you other stories about board meetings. I rarely attended the board meetings after that in any shul I was in. Who won? I don't remember.
Is this where it became part of our DNA
Is this where it became part of our DNA? I don't know. It seems to have been inborn. All right, let's go. We got two more things I think we need to look at. There's another thing that happens in that paragraph, which is very, very powerful. And that is Moshe turns, Hashem yilochem lochem, atem tacharishu. Right? God is going to fight for you, and you just be silent. What is the next pasuk? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Ma titzak elai, daber el bnei Yisrael v'yisrael. God says, hey, wait a minute. Why are you standing there calling out to me? What? You've got to go, and you've got to take that first step. And there are very many medrashim about how that first step was. Perhaps Nachshon ben Aminadav is the most famous, but others say certain tribes, etc., etc. But what Hashem is saying, and the rabbis take it further. The rabbis say, "Also Shah," at the bottom of the page, Moshe was prolonging his prayer. What was Moshe doing? He was davening. And God turns to him and says, my beloved ones are drowning in the sea, and you prolong your prayer. You got to do something. You've got to move. And this is an indication that throughout our history, we can't just depend on a Kodesh Baruch. Right? We depend on him. We know he's in charge, but he's depending on us. He's depending on us to take the first step. He's depending on us to do things. Yes. Right. Okay, very nice. Right.
Even though there are factions and you have the four groups, there are always people, Baruch Hashem, who will be willing to.
Okay, so for those who didn't hear, she's defending. I was a prosecutor and she was the defense attorney. She said that it's amazing that if we take the Nachshon ben Aminadav as the first to enter, he is the ancestor of Boaz, and Boaz and Ruth. I'll take it further. Boaz and Ruth create the lineage from which David comes. So it's very nice. And she said she suggested that it is in our DNA to move, to meet the challenge. Yeah, not everyone's. Okay. Okay. All right, let's go on. Two more things. Uvnei Yisrael hochu bayabasha besoch hayam, the last two paragraphs we're going to look at. V'amayim lohem choma miminam u'mismolam. Right? The Bnei Israel went into the dry land in the midst of the sea, and the water was for them a wall to the right and to the left. So the rabbis look at that particular language and they paint a very different picture of Kriyas Yamsuf than you and I are accustomed to. We're accustomed to the sea splits and we run in as a nation. Say the rabbis, the split in the sea was a shvil. What's a shvil? A narrow path. A narrow path. And in fact, some medrashim say they were 12 narrow paths for each shevet, but one way or the other, a narrow path. And they say the word betoch carries you to Moshe at Har Sinai going betoch ha'anan. He goes into the midst of the cloud. So this is the same. It's a small path. Now, I've wondered for years whether or not what the Chazal are saying, perhaps they are, perhaps they're not, is that for each Jew who had the courage to step into that sea, it was a narrow path. Right? At that moment, even if you're surrounded by everyone else, you're taking a risk. Right? So it's not that we all went in triumphantly, it's that some of us hesitated, some of us didn't, because shvil, what's a shvil? A shvil is a narrow path. You're going in and you're frightened. You're frightened. So that's a possibility, what they're painting. And maybe our vision is correct, and they're just saying it in terms of how they felt. And finally, the last paragraph I'm going to look at. Okay. After Yamsuf, how do the Israelites react? What? Sing, right? They sing and they dance, correct? But then after the nation sings and dances, all of a sudden we hear, Tikach Miriam Hanaviyah, Achos Aharon Esatof Biyada. Miriam takes the symbol in her hand and she brings out all of the women, and they continue and they dance as well. So what's going on here? Did they dance when the others danced as well, or they waited for them to finish? What? And why is she called Miriam Hanaviyah at this particular moment?
Because she knew to take the instruments.
All right. What? Say again.
She knew to take the instruments.
Right. All right. She knew to take the instruments. All right. Or she knew maybe. But what does she say? And this is my own. You'd like it or not? What? What? Right. She's only Aaron's sister because when she saved Moshe, she was Aaron's sister at that point. That's one answer. There are other answers as well, but that's really an issue in the sentence too. But look at the text. Look at the text. She says, "Shiru Hashem ki ga'oga." Sing to God. Sus v'rofo rama hayam. Sing to God, for He is great. Chariot and rider has drowned in the sea. Now, what's the question? The question is, that's similar, not exactly the same as the first psukim of Oz Yashir. So does that mean that she sang the whole song and she just began with this? I'm going to suggest no. I'm going to suggest that Miriam is the smartest one there. Miriam, and I can see it, in terms of wives giving their husbands advice. Miriam turns to Moshe and to Aaron and says, "What are you singing about? You're saying someday the nations will tremble, this will happen, that will happen. The only thing that's happened so far is Sus v'rochvo rabba vayam. That's worth celebrating. But then you got to move on. Right? In other words, it's limited. Basically, God saved us this time, but don't sing and dance for the future." And as proof that I may be right, the Torah, the next pasuk, and you don't have the dots here, says something very interesting. It's the only place I think that this verb is used. It says, Vayasa Moshe es Yisrael miyam suf. Moshe made the Israelites leave Yam Suf. Right? In other words, if he hadn't made us leave, we would be still dancing and singing at Yam Suf. Right? In other words, the point being that you can take that suggestion on that pasuk alone, or you can take it as I did, as a response to Miriam. Right? And therefore, what she's saying to them is, be realistic, see what's happened, celebrate what you're celebrating, but stop with these visions of the future. Nothing will happen unless you move on.
Isn't that implicated in the as?
That's what I was going to say that, and I didn't. Correct, very well said. But that in Miriam says, Shiru Lashem, sing to God, which is in the present, and Uz Yashir is couched as then we will sing, right? And that sets the stage for what follows, which is the song contains prophetic visions of things that are going to come, which Miriam may be saying won't come unless you start moving. Right? So that's the possibility. Yes.
Maybe a minority opinion, but I do hear that actually it was the woman who started singing first, and they get this from Vata Lahem. It's in masculine instead of in the feminine.
Interesting. All right.
To them and saying, let's start Shiru Lashem Kivolah.
That she
The women started and then
okay. Could be. It's not Pashut Pshat, but it's an interesting interpretation that the women started the singing and the dancing, and the proof of that is, or the support comes from the phrase Vatan Lahem, which is in the masculine, right? Or speaking of the nation, and therefore perhaps they responded to her singing. Okay, we're going to stop there. I thank you very much. Have a good day.